Hi, I'm Jermaine McDonald, and welcome to another live edition of Taking Stock. We're bringing you all the latest business news and telling you how it will affect you and your money. So if you're wondering where Kalila is, if you are a part of last week's show, you'd know that she had a death in her family, and so I'll be filling in for her this week. So please do send your heartfelt condolences to Kalila and her family. And we're definitely praying for her during this time. It is definitely hard losing your mom, and so it's a hard time. So please do send your condolences for her in the chat. So we have an amazing show lined up for you here tonight. But first, are you a part of the Money Mission community? If not, what are you waiting for? Go to moneymission.mn.co or click on the link in the description or comments to join. Now remember to hit the like button and subscribe to this channel, and let me know in the comments where you're joining from. So I see a few persons here already. So Portmore in the house, London, Kish, how you doing? Jacaranda Holmes, King Carly, Philip, as usual. So hi to everyone, and yeah, so welcome. All right, so up in tonight's show, followed by what's hot in business, and come on, let's get this money.
iCreate is under new management. The company has had a rough couple months, with reports of the stock being suspended to trade in August and its former CEO Tyrone Wilson stepping down. We'll discuss how the company plans to turn things around with its Group Chief Executive Officer Arlene Martin. And the analysts weigh in on the latest market developments. US billionaire Ray Dalio has released his 9 top stock and ETF picks. We'll discuss. But first, here's What's Hot, brought to you by JMMB Group, your best interest at heart. Cygnus Credit Investments wants to raise 4 billion Jamaican dollars through a preference share offer. Preference shareholders receive a fixed dividend, and their payment takes priority over ordinary shareholder dividends. The offer, launched on Monday, will see the company issuing 10 million shares across 3 categories. According to the company, Class C shares are priced at 100 Jamaican dollars per share and have a dividend yield of 10.5% rate due in 2025. Class D shares have an 8% rate due in 2025, while Class E shares with an 8.5% rate due in 2026. Class D and E shares are priced at $10 US per share. The minimum purchase for Class C shares is 500 shares and 50 shares for Classes D and E, followed by increments of 10 units. Jamaica's inflation finally dipped within the Bank of Jamaica's target range in October. According to Statin, point-to-point inflation for October was 5.1%. The BOJ's target range is 4 to 6%. This is the lowest inflation rate since 2021. NCB shareholders will receive a dividend payment on December 18. NCB Financial Group Chairman Michael Leachin announced the board's decision to resume payments on Friday. NCBFG has not paid a dividend in over 2 years. Leachin said the company will pay a 50 cents per share dividend to all shareholders on record by December 4. The payment will total over $1.2 billion. Meanwhile, NCBFG says it has agreed on a separation package for its former CEO Patrick Hylton and Deputy CEO Dennis Cohen. NCB said that both men officially resigned on November 13. According to the company's announcement, the separation package includes cash payments and share allotment. There was no word on the final figure, but NCB did say that the payment will affect the company's financial performance for the year. Hundreds of staff members at OpenAI, the company that created ChatGPT, have threatened to resign after the shock dismissal of former boss Sam Altman. 650 of the company's 770 employees signed a letter demanding that Altman be reinstated. Altman has become one of the most influential figures in the fast-growing generative artificial intelligence space. OpenAI's board fired Altman last Friday in a move that shocked the tech world. The employees have threatened to quit if the board members who voted to fire Altman do not resign. What's Hot was brought to you by JMMB Group, your best interest at heart.
Learn strategies to create amazing content that will stop people from scrolling and actually pay attention to you. Build a loyal audience excited to share your content and make it go viral. Make money on social media and run your platform like a business. Join me live inside Money Missions for this game-changing course, Money Marketing. And remember, go to the link in my bio and tap Money Marketing for 40% off. Let's get this money.
This segment of Taking Stock is brought to you by Bulwark Insurance Agency, insurance made easy.
All right, welcome back. So, Nana sent from far, far away. Sheldon says here and waiting. Sean is here and ready. Romain says Mandeville in the house. Yeah, I've always wanted to live in Mandeville. Maybe one day. Karine from Port Antonio. Earl said that he's here. And Jackie, thank you for the welcome. It's not my first time, but every time does feel like a brand new experience. And Humble Boss says condolences to Kalila and her family. Stay strong. And yeah, it's yeah. And Sean says that Cygnus preference share is sweet. So I'm very interested to know what you guys think of the preference shares. So please let me know in the comments your thoughts on the preference share. We'll be talking about it later, but let me know your thoughts in the comments about the preference share. All right. All right. So iCreate is under new management. So the company has had an interesting last few months with reports of the stock being suspended. So trading would have halted earlier this year. And so its former CEO, also Tyrone Wilson, had stepped down. So there's a lot of questions surrounding the company at this time. So joining me to discuss how the company plans to turn things around, we have Group Chief Executive Officer at iCreate, Arlene Martin, joining us tonight.
Good
Welcome,
evening,
Arlene.
Jermaine. Thank you. And good evening to all your listeners and viewers, especially those I understand interested in iCreate and particularly any of them who are investors. A very good evening to everyone.
Great. Thank you for joining us. So the first thing that we want to do is to really establish maybe how the last few months have been for iCreate. So there would have been questions, well, naturally surrounding once Tyrone would have stepped down. So what is your role and focus for the company right now? Well,
Okay.
or just give us like a recap of the last few months as well.
Sure. So I think the recap, and most people would want to begin with the resignation of Tyrone Wilson. And at that point, I was appointed as the interim CEO. He resigned at the time from his position as president and CEO, as well as director of the board. So I would have stepped in as interim CEO, and we had appointed as interim chairman Mr. Ivan Carter. Ivan Carter had served as the chair of the audit committee previously, so had been there before as a director. I had been serving as chairman of the board, and so stepped into the capacity as interim CEO while Ivan Carter would have been chair. And in that time, and I noticed that there was a comment there or a question in terms of even bringing things up to date with the JSE. So you mentioned that there was a suspension in trading in shares, and that also took place within days of the resignation. And that would have been, the notice would have said that was because of the delay. And I would say significant delay in the publishing of the audited financial statements for 2022. We did meet that deadline that was set once we had agreed with the JSE on that final extension to September 30, and those statements were submitted on September 29. So we were able to do that. We also were required to appoint, as required by the JSE for companies listed on the junior market, mentor. And this is a board mentor as required, as I mentioned, under the rules for junior market companies. So we would have, and this would have been late September into early October, appointed a mentor to the board, Mr. Kalanda Hutchinson. So with meeting those requirements, we would have had the resumption of the trading in shares. So that has been happening now since early October. Very good. And now we're really focused on growing the company, stabilizing things. And, we can talk more about that. I know you probably have some specific questions in terms of how we plan to do it. So I'll await your questions, Jermaine.
Okay. So what the next question that I'll ask you really is the mandate or focus of the company the same under your leadership?
So, what I would say is that there are a couple of things that we have to look at now, and I note that question, and I'll address it very shortly. Is there is stability and there is growth, and stability and growth based on things that have been happening when you have new leadership and just settling everyone into place, but stability in terms of the operations, corporate governance, and a number of things like that. And then focused on growth, not only because of the opportunities that are out there in all of the segments, but also the potential that's in the company. The focus on growth and stability also come from the recent acquisitions. So in January 2022, we would have closed the acquisition of Get Paid Group Limited that does SMS communication as well as e-commerce. And we would have announced in 2022 the acquisition of visualvibe.com, which is a digital out-of-home advertising company that closed fully earlier this year, end of May 2023. So you'd have seen that we started reporting and including as a group the financials for Visual Vibe beginning in, and we also synchronized that we had the Q2 results. That was the period ending June 23 published. We'd have seen 1 month reflected for Visual Vibe then, and then in our Q3, you would have seen that Visual Vibe was fully represented. So I do want to respond to this question that you have here. Can you please, in the simplest way, explain what iCreate is and what is the core business? iCreate began as a training institute with a focus on impacting the creative and digital economies. And its training programs focus on those areas that for creative talent, videography, photography, digital marketing, the things around that sector. And it really is about equipping individuals for participating in those economies and growing those economies. But also it's about how companies can tap into that so that they can actually take advantage of these things and grow. Coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic, what would have happened is, or in the middle of the pandemic, with the measures that were put in place, we stopped doing all in-person classes, and all the classes were in person. So we shifted from simply a business growth strategy to a corporate growth strategy to emerge from COVID, and that's what took us into acquisitions. So that was primarily a mergers and acquisition strategy that we have. And having executed, and I just mentioned the acquisition of two companies, iCreate Limited is now a group of companies rather than simply or just solely the institute that's focused on training. So now in that group, and you would see in the annual report that was also published recently, that you have in that group now the three companies, iCreate Institute or iCreate Limited, which has the training institute as well as the creative agency, Vertical Creative, operating there. Then you have Get Paid, and as I mentioned, Get Paid is digital communication. So when you think about, and we just had some weather that would probably have required emergency communication, SMS is a part of that SMS communication, which is very reliable. So if you think about really needing to get communication, both if internet is down or people don't have data, then we can certainly still reach you via SMS. So that's one of the things that Get Paid does. However, our core area is e-commerce, and that's how it serves the digital economy, is that it enables companies to trade by setting up your website and different things, a range of e-commerce services from consulting to training to actually doing the sites. However, importantly, because one of the challenges that we have in the Caribbean, in particular in Jamaica, because you do have some territories in the Caribbean that are allowed to use some payment platforms. But when you're doing e-commerce in Jamaica, you tend to have some limitations on payment platforms. With Get Paid, they offer payment solutions so you can actually transact and collect money without hassle consistently with Get Paid. And then I think most people would be familiar with Visual Vibe. You see the digital boards across Kingston as well as across the island. We're in 5 parishes, so digital out-of-home advertising. So that's the essence now of what the group is. And our mandate right now, Jermaine, and for everyone is the that kind of consolidation of how it is that we now get the synergies for greater efficiencies, continue to deliver value to our clients, and in so doing, deliver value to our shareholders. So it's synergy for operational efficiency, synergy for our clients as well, and then looking at how it is that we grow the company in so doing while still impacting the creative and digital economies.
Okay, so in short, what you're saying is that the path that you'd have started down when Tyrone was CEO, you're still down that path, and that is still the mandate that you're holding as a company?
Yes, so I would say that's still the mandate that we're holding in terms of the gaining the synergies. So we've closed the acquisitions, we're building those companies, we're growing those companies, and we're refocusing and putting attention back to the Institute. I mentioned that we would have discontinued just for a period post-COVID some of the programs that we had before. We're getting increased demand for these. So we're looking at next year and the coming year. So it really is just a couple months away, the reintroduction of these creative courses that people would have liked to benefit from. And what we're looking at as well is the expansion of courses. So when you think about the creative economies and digital, it's not simply graphic design, videography. There's so much more. So we have programs for the Digital Marketing Institute. We're looking at user experience, things like that, user interface design. So it is what we'll be doing with the Institute as well is reintroducing programs that we had before, but also enhancing so that we're giving more to people so that our creative economies will grow because we are equipping, upskilling, introducing, just educating people for these fields where that it will allow just the sectors that exist in Jamaica to grow, but where we can even create new sectors for a stronger, more robust creative economy from right here in Jamaica. So that's our focus even as we identify new programs and new partners to deliver under the Institute.
Okay. So Tyrone would have tendered his resignation a few months ago. Is there, or what is the working relationship between iCreate and Tyrone currently? If at
So, if at all, yes, there is a relationship. Don't worry. If you think about it in terms of just handing over a baton in a relay, you do have to hand over to someone. Sometimes it's not simply, just cheerleading from the side. You rely on that person for support. As you can imagine, when you look at the composition now, I was not in the operations of the company. And so when you look at the leadership team that you have in place now, I mentioned our chair, myself, and the group CFO, the deeper understanding that we have to gain for the company, getting up to speed on things, that knowledge has to come from us, and it comes from us from that close relationship that we still have in terms of that transition. So the transition from it's kind of like orientation and onboarding, handing over, that still is required. And we've been able to do quite a bit of that so that what would not have happened is, just a big disruption in the operations. So because of the intensity that's now required in terms of stability and moving forward, it would have been harder if you had just a total break or total separation without relying. So by having that kind of connection and that handover, it really has helped in the pace with which during these 3 months we've been able to accomplish some of the things that we have managed to accomplish, because I did mention the completion of the audit, lifting of the suspension, and since then as well, in addition to the 2022 audited statements, we've issued the quarterly financial statements unaudited for both Q2 as well as Q3. So we've been able to go at pace because there aren't significant knowledge gaps or things like that.
Okay. So earlier this year, we had gotten news that Tyrone and Ideas Execution founder Kevin Frith were having some challenges in the acquisition.
Not going to comment on that one. We're not at a place to get into detail on that one, Jermaine.
Can you say anything at all about it?
Not saying anything at all about that one. Focus on the growth of the company. And one of the things that you would have recognized, and I can say this to the listeners, is so this is my first interview actually, since we have a lot of work to do. to grow the company. And this is about delivering value to our shareholders. This is about a focus again on our clients, and our shareholders, our clients, our team require our attention, and we have been very focused on working rather than just commenting and giving feedback on things. So I just want to comment on that to say the focus has been on doing the work. We'll begin to speak more now that we've gotten through some of the things, because we do need to communicate with persons for them to know and understand what's happening with the company. However, our focus really is on where the company is right now, where it is that we're going, and how it is that we're getting there.
Okay. So you mentioned the acquisition of Visual Vibes. Has that process been completed?
So we've had control, operational control of Visual Vibe since, I would say, June 1, because that transaction closed in terms of the handover May 31, 2023. And so we have had that. As I mentioned, you would have seen the June results in our Q2, the period ending June 30, or the quarter ending June 30. You would have seen that we reported for the first month. You would have had information on that in the annual report, and then certainly for the quarter that ended September 30, you would see the integration of Visual Vibe. So we have already started that integration, and fully operational with Visual Vibe. And as mentioned, it really is about leveraging all the synergies operationally, but also for added value to our clients. Because when you think about a typical client, you can see how it is that across the three companies, we can serve them to add value as they build, as they deliver their products, and as they deliver their services.
Okay. So in terms of, so one of the things that we heard last year was, so for example, there were talks of a rights issue, and that rights issue was meant to, for example, help with the financing for the acquisition of Visual Vibes. So one, what's the status of said rights issue? Because I believe we heard that VM was going to be, I think, somehow related in terms of that transaction. So what's the status of that one? And two, how were you able to finance the Visual Vibe acquisition, and is that process completed?
Okay, so yes, there was supposed to be a rights issue, and that process ended, so we didn't actually fully execute on that. And so what we've had to do is to do private financing for the acquisition process. So that's the route that we have been taken. It is private financing, so we won't get into that kind of detail. However, that's what we're able to do to raise capital for closing the acquisition.
So when you
what I would say is that for the start of next year, in our first quarter, you'll probably hear more about additional financing that we're going to be doing for further expansion of the company in terms of raising private equity. Private equity, I think you're going to be asking with that, Jermaine.
Well, so what I wanted to ask you was, so you mentioned there's private financing used to close Visual Vibe. Can you say the type of financing, even if you can't get into the details? Was it a loan? Was it like what type of financing was it?
So what I'll say now is private equity, and as I mentioned before, it is so we have to look at where we are in terms of the stages with things. It is private, so had it been an APO with a JMMB, nice and public, I would have shared all of that information. However, what I would say is that it's a private deal that we're able to obtain, and I think that it's important as one of the things that we were able to accomplish, because it demonstrates that, because for someone to enter into an investment like this, clearly would have to demonstrate in terms of when you think of solid projections, performance, there is potential for growth in the companies. There is value to be harnessed, and I think that's actually a very good signal when you think about positive signals for the company, that we can communicate to the market that we were able to raise that financing to move forward.
Okay. Can you talk to us a little bit about Get Paid? So we are not fully clear as to,
right.
You mentioned a part of its business in terms of SMS and maybe e-commerce, but how profitable is Get Paid? How much a part of the strategy is it for iCreate, and what can we expect from Get Paid in the future?
Okay. So with Get Paid, I mentioned two main areas, and the SMS communication or digital communication, because there are different options for that, is an area of the business that does not have significant margin. You're leveraging someone else's infrastructure. However, it's a critical service. So, I mentioned that local companies can send messages. However, there are international companies that want to reach to not only the Jamaican market, but the Caribbean market as well. And so they're able to consolidate from large companies, Google, Meta, etc., to tap in. And so Get Paid is a company that serves as a client to these broker companies for digital communication. And there was website development services that it offers, as well as e-commerce. And those services have a higher margin that will contribute to greater profitability. As we're growing the company, because you would have seen the Q3 results just in terms of where the margins stand, as we focus on a greater composition of that revenue from e-commerce, and that would be through new partnerships. And by the way, the e-commerce can be B2B as well as B2C, so there's significant opportunity for it. We can extend regionally, though that's not immediate. But as we look at that part of the business, that division of the business more, where we'll have greater margins, then that profitability from Get Paid should grow significantly. We would have invested, or the company would have invested just before acquisition in software. We're just leveraging that now, no significant capital investment immediately for the platform, so it's able to run. And so we can look at expecting some strong profitability from that company in the coming year as well.
Okay. So as it relates to the series of events that would have led to iCreate being suspended earlier this year, there would have been essentially a governance issue that would have led to that event. How have you taken steps to ensure that those challenges won't happen again in the future?
Okay, so the good thing is, and again, what I said before is that let us do the work and then we can speak. I think you would see some signs that we've already begun to address that when it comes to the basics of compliance in terms of submitting things and meeting deadlines. So at a minimum, and just to start out, the unaudited financial statements for the quarter ending September 30 was submitted on time. So what we did and we had this 11-point plan in terms of going in, naturally at the core of that would have been governance. And we went straight to it in terms of the external factors, the internal factors in terms of capabilities and a number of things, and able to do that. So, from a leadership perspective, it is or culture, it's now a mantra of ours. So it's not just excellence, diligence, but it is aiming for best practices in governance. So it's not just meeting deadlines, it's beating deadlines, and it's doing things with excellence. So we're taking steps towards that. But fortunately, we can say that we have begun that process, and we definitely will continue to do so. You would have heard me mention that we have the board mentor in place. That was one of the things for governance. So just working through, our checklists of governance things that we have to address. We focused on that. You can look out to hear more about the composition of the board, how it is that we're strengthening that with committees. So we're beginning at, the core of who we are is where we're beginning actually in terms of a culture for that. And then it's at the highest level of leadership with the board, as well as with the executive leadership and that core leadership of the chairman, myself, and the group CFO, and then filtering that now down to the companies, the leadership level of each of the companies, into the culture. So it's something that we're really working on, because it is a priority for us, and we'll speak a little bit more about that at our AGM that's coming up on Friday.
Okay, so based on just what we've seen from iCreate over the past couple of years, certainly you can imagine that investors, even existing shareholders of iCreate may not be sure how to feel about the company, right? You mentioned that this is your first interview. What would you say to investors who are simply just unclear as to how to feel about the company? Because a lot of the things that you've tried to do now behind the scenes may not be visible in terms of them seeing that there is in fact change. So what would you say to those investors who are just simply unclear as to how to feel about the company?
Okay, so there's I can't ask someone to feel a particular way. What we can do is feed to them what is going to inform that feeling. Do we have What's the level of confidence that people have in iCreate right now? What is the trust that people may have for the company? These are things that we certainly have to work on. But in terms of giving them clarity, this is the start to communication. As I said, we really wanted to just get down to work. This is the start to the communication to our shareholders and to the investing public. So interviews will continue. As we roll things out, we will continue to communicate. We have our annual general meeting coming up this Friday, and it's at 10 a.m. at the Jamaica Pegasus. So there'll be more information that's going to be shared at that annual general meeting, and then we'll continue to have conversations. And each time we have updates and news to share, we will share that. Where you have questions, I mean, you have your own program and platform, Jermaine. So when you're ready, we'll come back and speak some more. Just any question that we're not able to answer right now, where you think that people really need clarity. But I've spoken about governance. I've spoken a little bit about growth strategies. So I'm not sure if there's anything specifically that you may want me to comment on at this point that you think will help with clarity, or if you can just guide me in terms of where you think people need a little more clarity in terms of what's happening with iCreate.
Okay, well, we're actually going straight to the comments now to get some of those questions.
Okay.
So Shellyanne, Shellyanne is asking, who is Arlene? What's your background and what qualifies you to be the new CEO? And how will you restore shareholders' trust?
Okay. Shellyanne, thank you for that question. Yes, we did no introduction of who I am. So within iCreate, I had previously been on the board serving as chair, initially as acting in that capacity, and then was chair. Prior to that, so my background is heavily public sector before going into private sector. So I would have worked on strategy development and largely things at a national level, export strategies, investment strategies, and policy. However, most recently in private sector, I've done business coaching and consulting, focused on helping small to medium-sized and even large companies grow. So I do consulting and coaching, or I had been doing consulting and coaching with enterprises prior to this, and had some experience running my own business, which I put to hibernate coming out of COVID. So in terms of my background, like private sector experience, strategy experience, or just company experience, there is some that I would have had. In terms of restoring trust of our shareholders, what I would say it is that it is my intention personally, and you can understand that, to step into this capacity in light of where things are is something that some would probably say is fairly brave. And it therefore means that I'm committed and that I am confident and that I trust the team that we have, beginning with the board, who all remained. So we had no board resignations at the time. We all followed the process through and worked through. So I have the trust of the board, have the trust of the management team of the companies. And so together we are committed to the goals that someone else just mentioned and we can comment on. But we're very committed to restoring trust, and that is by delivering the results and delivering value to shareholders, because you deserve that. You've invested in the company, and you invested in the company in order for a return, and we owe that to you. So I would say, essentially the biggest thing is I'm dedicated to making it happen, and you can trust that I'm working to build the team that will deliver that trust and that will deliver results for you.
All right. Jamaican investor is asking, the vendor note for US 1,270,000 that was to be paid on deadline for September 30th this year, was it for executed or still pending?
Right. So I think we'd covered on that, where you asked where that was, and I said that there is the private equity that we looked at for it. So that was private equity. We had, you spoke about that where last year we spoke about doing an APO for raising capital for closing that vendor note. However, we've gone a different route. We've gone the private route to be able to do that.
So you were able to meet that deadline for payment of the vendor note that's being referred to here?
We are good.
Okay. All right. Sean is asking, can you tell us some of those deadlines and goals that you have set for the company? I know you mentioned governance being one of them, and you mentioned board composition,
Right.
but what can shareholders
Right.
expect
So
in tangible goals?
Right. We summarized a couple of, well, not a couple, we summarized 6 key milestones that we wanted to attain in 2023 in the annual report. And it was an annual report for 2022, but we felt that with so much time that had passed, we really needed people to get a sense of what it is that we're doing. So we have one goal around corporate governance. I've hinted at that, where we're aiming to best in class and not simply just meeting compliance. We are focused on strengthening the brands and the reputation. So the work on the brands is about not just awareness of the name iCreate, but an understanding. One question that we had is, what is iCreate? And it's a question that I even had once I took this role on, where people said, well, I'm familiar with the company, but what does it do? So in terms of that strengthening the brand, it is not simply a brand awareness that people know the name, but that people truly understand what the company is and have an experience of delivering value and working on the brand from that core element of it. In order to do that, we're going to have to expand the internal capabilities of the team. So it's looking at our systems, but also the team are some of the things that we're going to be looking at. And then we have some aggressive growth plans for the company for 2023 and going into. So what we're doing, and 2023 is almost over, we're doing the groundwork that will help us with our growth plans for 2024. So, and that would be measurable through revenue, profit, capitalization are some of the things that we're working on there. We would have already closed the acquisition of Visual Vibe as one of the milestones for 2023. And broadly, we're looking at the financial soundness of the company. And when we talk about financial soundness is, so in terms of some key points related to that is, for the group and for each of the operations, is profitability from normal operations. That's something that we have to attain. We really have to attain as well positive cash flow from operations, and that would be across the groups that we're fulfilling obligations. And then year on year, what we want to look at is share value, share price, as well as market capitalization. So these are goals that we have foundational parts of it for in 2023. And then you'll hear more as we speak about our solid plans for 2024.
Okay. Do you intend to sell any additional shares in Visual Vibes?
So that is a consideration. So when you think about growth, and if you think about that industry where, you have other persons, and Visual Vibe is purely digital. However, you have the traditional billboard companies who are entering that space. When you think of the large reach, as well as that out of home advertising is growing, any significant growth for Visual Vibe is not going to come from simply reinvesting profit in the business. So if we're to double, for example, or outdoor representation, or if we're to take out of home from not just outdoor to also in home in terms of commercial places, then clearly we'll have to raise capital for that. And so that is something that is we're open to doing in 2024. And I hope that answers your question, Jermaine.
Okay. Jamaican investor is asking, who holds the 25.5 million preference shares of iCreate?
So I know that that is. Could you bring that question to our AGM? But I'll look into that in terms of just some specifics on that. We can look at that. But we have published. I mean, it's a publicly traded company, so I know that information is listed as well.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if it's like the total in terms of the breakdown, or if there's something specific that person wanted to know. So
Jamaican investor, can you give us some context?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
There was also,
yes.
Yeah, I'm trying to get in a couple of
Sure.
questions.
Yeah, so this is on the chalet development. You can
Yes.
expect to see reporting on that not in next year. So when you think of the duration, so it's it's real estate development, it takes time. So with the phase of the development where you'll have most of the progress in 2024, that's when you'll see any kind of reporting from iCreate on or investment relationship with the chalet development. So you will not see information on that in terms of financial figures from that immediately.
Okay. So I just have two more questions for you. One, when can investors expect to see the company profitable overall from all of its operations? That's the first one.
That's an interesting one. So we're starting with each of the companies being profitable from operations next year. It's an ambitious target. We already have that in place for the entities Get Paid as well as Visual Vibe. We have to restore growth for iCreate the Institute in terms of with the program delivery. So we'll have that, and we're focused on partnerships for new programs to offer to the market, reintroducing the training programs, as I mentioned, more of those in-person ones, as well as continuing the partnerships that we had with key stakeholders, partners in the Jamaican landscape, corporate as well as non-corporate persons. So we're looking towards profitability from all operations next year.
Okay, and the final question that I'll ask you for now is, so you mentioned potentially raising capital for next year. Any thoughts as to what that would look like? Is that in Q1, Q2 of next year? And what do you see yourself targeting the use of those funds for?
So Q1 would be very early, Jermaine. We're beginning to put the planning in place for it. So what I mentioned in terms of the funding for that, the purpose of that is really the expansion of Visual Vibe. And I did hint to that in terms of when you look at the representation as well as the significant potential of the sector across Jamaica as well as regionally. The number of screens that you have and what's happening, then we can significantly grow the company with additional screens in new locations. We're in 5 parishes, so we can expand that significantly, as well as shift from, or not even shift, but expand from only outdoor to actually indoor out-of-home advertising. So for the purpose of that investment in the company would be significant expansion.
Okay. So do you have any final comments to shareholders and or audience?
Yes. So I realize that there are a lot of questions. So now I understand, Jermaine, what it is that you are referring to. So what I would say is, and hopefully these questions are saved and we can access them at some point. What I would say is that I hear you, that there is a need to share more information, to speak solidly, plainly about what's happening in the company. So we will actually begin that. I mentioned that we have our AGM on Friday. You'll hear more plans from us. And going from that, as we close out 2023 and as we go into 2024, we'll definitely be speaking a lot more, via persons like you with your program, Jermaine, as others, Kalila, to share information as things happen. We've been posting things on the website, but we really need to speak. And so what I would say to persons is hopefully they'll invite iCreate again to hear more about what it is that we're doing. But it's not for us, it really is for you. So keep the questions going into them, and we'll make ourselves available to share information with you so that you understand what's happening in the company and how it will impact you and the share performance of the company.
All right. Thank you so much, Arlene, for the
Thank
time.
you.
All the best.
Thank you. All right. Take care. Bye. Thank you, everyone.
All right. So now it's time for our poll question. How do you feel about NCB finally settling their separation packages with Patrick, Hylton, and Dennis Cohen? Option A, I want to see the final numbers. B, I don't like that it will impact Q4 performance. C, how will it impact dividends? D, how much is cash versus shares? Something that I definitely want to know. Or E, all of the above. So be sure to give us your feedback for the poll question. And up next, we've got your market recap, and the analysts are standing by.
This segment of Taking Stock was brought to you by Bulwark Insurance Agency, Insurance Made Easy.
Hey moneymakers, join the KRM fam with our official merch. Get it now at KalilaReynolds.com. Let's get this money.
The JC Combined Index was mostly stable last week. 123 stocks traded across the main and junior markets for the week ending Friday, November 17, 2023. 43 made gains, 74 lost value, and 6 stayed the same. 231 million shares changed hands on the Jamaican dollar market, valued at $784 million. Trans-Jamaican Highway was last week's most traded stock. It took up 42% of market volume with 100 million shares trading. The stock lost 2 cents to open the new week at $1.98. JFP traded the second highest. The stock lost 6 cents to open this week at $1.41. And the Tropical Battery rounded out last week's most traded with 28 million shares changing hands. The stock gained 3 cents to open Monday at $1.89. Now let's see who had the biggest gains for the week. Cygnus Real Estate Finance USD was the market's biggest gainer. The stock was up 33% to open Monday at 10 cents US. Siboney had the second biggest gain last week. The stock was up 23% to close the week at $1.54. And Sagicor Select Funds Manufacturing and Distribution was up 18% to open the new week at 64 cents. On the losing side now, iCreate was the week's biggest loser. The stock lost 12 cents to open Monday at 57 cents. First Rock Real Estate Investments was the week's second biggest loser, opening the new week at $7.12. And KLE Group lost 15% to close the week at $1.23. Over on the Trinidad and Tobago Stock Exchange, the composite index was mostly flat last week. Massive was the most traded stock. The stock lost 22 cents to open this week at $4.27 TT. NCB Financial was the biggest gain of the week. The stock was up almost 13% to start the week at $3.20 TT. And on the losing side, Trinidad and Tobago NGL fell 9% to open Monday at $11.36 TT. Over in the US, the Dow Jones and the S&P 500 gained 2% last week, while the Nasdaq was up almost 3%. Motorists got a win at the pumps last week. Gas and diesel prices fell by $4.50. In foreign exchange, it took an average $156.43 Jamaican to purchase $1 last Friday. That's 47 cents less than the week before. Meanwhile, it took an average $116.53 Jamaican to purchase $1 Canadian. One British pound cost on average $194.95 Jamaican. And you could buy €1 for $171.95 Jamaican on average. Finally, on the crypto markets, Bitcoin prices were down 1% over the past 5 days, trading at $37,339 US on Monday. Ethereum prices also fell 1%, trading at $2,038 US on Monday. This segment of Taking Stock, The Analyst, is brought to you by Profit Jumpstarter. Disclaimer: this is not intended as financial advice. Please consult a licensed financial advisor before making investment decisions.
All right, it's time now for the Analysts. I'm joined by Keisha Bailey, CEO of Profit Jumpstarter and business writer at The Observer, David Rose. So David's topic is JMMB International Limited has gained a securities dealer license in Barbados. David, tell us a little bit about that.
So we know JMMB Group Limited operates in Jamaica, the Dominican Republic, and Trinidad and Tobago. They've now officially gained a presence in Barbados, which is one of the major financial centers in the Caribbean, because you tend to find IBCs and a lot of businesses of significance incorporated there. So even the Sagicor financial company share that JMMB Group owns is held under JMMB International Limited. So this actual entry into Barbados, gives them that reach and presence across the region to offer services on a dynamic basis. Why did I say dynamic basis? So you would have seen whereby NCB Capital Markets, as a Cayman, Barbados, Trinidad, and Guyana branch, and having that kind of depth and reach across the region allows you to offer services in a variety of means, and also to build a further client base, which can actually tap back to your domestic capital markets for potential deals. So, it's a big deal for JMMB. I'm not sure that we're going to see any material jump or impact, within the next 6 months before JMB's financial year ends, but there's still a platform that they can build on going forward, to grow not just revenue, but also grow profits and diversify themselves a little bit further in the region. So that's, just where and the context of JMB International. And it comes against the backdrop of the fact that during the quarter, we would have seen, JMMB Group reporting a net loss, which, would have been impacted by Sagicor Financial Company's own net loss because they report a share of Sagicor Financial Company's net loss, but also because of higher interest expense, which is because of high interest rates. So to grow this other area of business, which would be described as not interest income, would be a key part to, kind of stabilize them, or I should say stabilize JMMB Group in volatile times as different events go on.
Okay. All right. And Keisha, I believe you wanted to speak on Ray Dalio has released 9 top stocks and ETF picks. So you're going to talk to us a little bit about that. And also, Cygnus has their preference share offer out now. So I think you'll be talking to us about both of those things.
Yeah, I'll touch on both. Let's start on the US side with Ray Dalio. So a lot of us know who Ray Dalio is. Very successful investor, and he used to be the chairman and co-chief investment officer at Bridgewater, so one of the largest hedge funds in the world. So he's no longer in that position as the chairman and co-chief investment officer. However, persons still watch that hedge fund very closely to see what they're doing. And in the most recent 13F investor filings, which shows you the holdings of the different investments they have in their fund, the top 9 that they're having now are Procter & Gamble, Coca-Cola, Costco, Pepsi, Walmart, the S&P 500 ETF, and Johnson & Johnson. So I thought it very interesting because when you look at all of those companies, you see that the fund is taking a very defensive stance, for want of a better word. And that's interesting to see because right now what's in place, a lot of tech, a lot of growth, Microsoft being at all-time highs. That's really what's driving. So when you see a really large hedge fund like this starting to become a little defensive, it makes me wonder, is something coming? What will 2024 really hold? And for many investors, you may be thinking about what your investment strategy is going to be for 2024, or it should be. As you're thinking about that, you want to think about the balance. When we see large hedge funds being defensive, but the overall market still supporting tech and growth, which side do you want to be on? Do you want a little bit of each? Do you want one over the other? It's just some food for thought as you start thinking about what you want to do with your money and your investments for 2024. So that's it on the international market side. Now, back in Jamaica, the Cygnus preference shares there. So wanted to look at that as well in terms of the features of it and to see, is it really something that's attractive and what purpose does it really serve for investors? I know some persons may be thinking of it as, am I buying it for growth, or is it going to be something that I want the income from? So just so that I dissect and look through the prospectus, I really look at the terms and what's there. The rates on the Jamaican side of the preference shares are very attractive. It's 10.5%. It beats inflation, because that's one of the main things as investors we have to think about. Are we beating inflation? Is this return something that makes sense compared to inflation rates, and also what else could you be getting in the market right now at that rate? So 10.5 on Jamaica really makes sense to me, right? And then on the US side now, 8 and 8.5% again are very attractive rates. When we think about what Cygnus is using the funds to do, it's likely that they're bringing in capital to make future loans, future credit investments. So their cost of funds, that blended rate, is going to be attractive to them. They just need to make sure now that whatever projects and companies that they're lending to, they are lending at a higher rate than they've accessed capital at. So that will be it now in the future months to see, all right, what rate of return is Cygnus going to be getting on these investments, and how does that compare to the cost of funds, which we know are largely going to be this preference share. Yeah.
Any comments from you on the preference share, David?
To be honest, it comes down to your cup of tea, because a lot of persons have asked me, does this offer make sense or anything else, and I just to people, the oversimplification is you're getting a required, or in this case, guaranteed dividend payment. And ordinary shares, a dividend is discretionary. Preference shares, in this case, one that is cumulative redeemable, or even debt, these payments are required that have to be made before you get to ordinary shareholders. And in the same breath, the reality is the investable universe within Jamaica, and just in this current economic environment, is relatively limited. So why do I say limited? So we've seen where the JSE has had a significant decline this year across a variety of securities, and on the flip side, you might hear about certificate deposits, treasury bills, and some of these other options. But a caveat in one instance is that I can't remember if it's a treasury bill or the CD. One of them requires $1 million, other requires $5,000. Some persons, will go to their broker, and the broker will be like, we require $1 million to participate in this BOJ/GOJ offer. So to actually have the preference share offer is actually a way for persons to kind of get that relative fixed income like structure in their portfolio that isn't generally available to a small investor. So for example, we have JMMB Group Limited, which has 10 preference shares listed on the JSE. There is Apple Limited, which currently has 4 listed preference shares. We have PBS with 3. We have 138 with 1. AS Readiness is their own. And the funny thing is, I highlighted it to you, Jeremy, and highlighted other persons that, for example, with JMMB GL 7.5, 2021 it was paying 2.3%. 2022 was paying 5.34%, and in 2023 it's paying 9.3%. And while JMMB is potentially seeking to actually ask its preference shareholders to extend the tenure on these preference shares, and at the end of the day, JMMB still has to give a relatively attractive proposal to the preference shareholders for them to extend it. And the reality is, Cygnus' preference share offer at 10.5% on the JMD side, it is, a contextual perspective, relatively good from what an average investor would have access to, because the only other preference share that's given a rate of that magnitude is PBS's 10.5% preference share. However, the tenure also matters. So whereas the Cygnus JMD, which is the Class C preference share, is only for 2 years, the PBS preference share that I'm referencing a while ago has a minimum period of 15 years for it actually can be redeemed. While you can access on a JSE these actual preference shares, you might not get that opportunity if liquidity is technically tight. And on the flip side with the USD, you're looking at even smaller universe if your options are only limited to Jamaica. So the offer really comes on to your preference as an investor, but also what is in your universe that you can actually earn potentially above that rate, or get a comparable rate or amount that would justify, that potential investment. So sometimes I'll be seeing preferences at significant discounts on the JSE, and they're stepping them up. So while they might be given a lower fixed rate, this the difference between the price I paid versus the maturity price justifies the purchase.
Okay. So the way I see it, thanks David and Keisha, the way I see it, preference share, if you're looking for income consistently, then that's what you go with, because you're not, it's not a capital gains play, right? It's an income play. So as Keisha mentioned, the interest rate would be attractive, especially for those who want to kind of set it and leave it, right? Keisha, we know those type of investors that they want like low maintenance income. I think that's kind of where it fits, because it's just guaranteed and predictable in that sense. But yeah, I mean, there was questions that I think Jason Morris from Cygnus cleared up. So you're free to check out that interview for those who have questions around it. They did speak to, similar to what you said, Keisha, about them targeting, of course, returns that would be greater than the interest they're paying out, right? So they're looking for something above that, and they're sure that they're able to achieve that, and then so they're confident they'll be able to continue to grow. And they did mention that they have that capital that they're seeking to raise is still not going to be enough, so they're actually seeking outside capital as well, which says or hints to the fact that they have a good pipeline in terms of their perspective to continue to give returns both on the preference share side and to ordinary shareholders. So yeah. So I don't see any questions for the analysts. There is a question here. I don't know if any one of you can answer. Can NHT issue stocks and remain a government entity? I'm not sure that's in their MO, but
so yeah. So persons use the term stocks loosely, but option always exists to list some form of security on a market if the need arises. So I say if the need arises because I remember, doing my research that Margaretville Caribbean Limited issued a preference share a couple of years ago. They see this on the JSE, and it matured and they redeemed it. And we have the case whereby because JPS has its preference list on the JSE, that's the way we get a little insight into JPS. So if NHT wants to list a financial instrument that fit the criteria of the JSE's listed requirements for the existing markets, it's an option. It wants to list a security, but ordinary share is not the case.
Yeah. I think this question may be for you, Keisha. Why buy bonds when the yield curve is kind of normalizing? I think Kuama is asking that, or maybe it's just a general statement, but it seems like a question that maybe for you, Keisha.
Yeah. So I guess, who am I? Are you talking about preference shares? Because preference shares are not bonds, two very different things. They do make periodic payments together, so that is a similarity. But the essence of buying bonds, it's not for growth. Bonds are not growth investments. They give you income, as do preference shares. And yes, the prices of bonds will change as interest rates change, because that's how the yield curve works. Yes, but I'm not really getting your question about why buy it when the yield curve is normalizing. Maybe you're thinking that bonds provide growth, but that's not really the intended purpose of having bonds in a portfolio. So I'd probably just stop your question there. If you're thinking bonds are growth investments, they are not. I think that would kind of help.
Some more context for my might help. Philip is asking you, Keisha, how do you like NVIDIA's earnings?
They are fantastic. NVIDIA is at all-time highs. I was looking at it earlier with some clients in terms of the growth there, and it's one of the top performing stocks all year. When we see those kind of growth, people may come in now, I want to chase it, and say, well, should I be buying now, given that the stock is up 200% this year? No, the trade is over, right? In terms of future growth, yes, there's gonna be, but do you want to be chasing stocks? Not mine. That I don't do that. We'll chase.
Yeah.
NVIDIA is indeed to wait after hours.
Yeah, the price came back down after hours. Yeah, but still, I mean, nothing significant enough, David. Say go back.
Well, I'm happy to see Microsoft at all-time highs.
Satya is a genius. The man just swooped down and just cleaned up a continuous storm.
Yeah.
And it's funny in the sense that governance is an important part of, in a company or an institution, and yet governance in this instance is leading to the downfall, in a sense, of OpenAI's operations, in a sense, because when you have 740 out of 780 staff members say we're willing to resign if you guys don't leave, that's a very telling sign. And the fact that you have Microsoft and even Salesforce and other companies saying, hey, we'll match your pay dollar for dollar, that's just crazy. Somebody pointed it out that when Microsoft would have invested $10 billion into the profitable entity or profit-driving entity of OpenAI under the corporate structure, they would basically get all the employees and everything else for literal $0, in a sense. No premium price to pay, none of that. Just simple 1, 2, 3, soup during the chaos.
Yep. I'm happy for it. So I think that's it. Thank you, Keisha and David, for your thoughts tonight and that perspective. So thank you so much.
You're welcome, Jermaine.
Bye.
All right, that's it for tonight's show.
This segment of Taking Stock, The Analyst, was brought to you by Profit Jumpstarter.
I see you waiting for me. You're in my reach, but I have to have a little extra push to get close to you. Are you flirting with me? You want me to come get you, but you won't fall into my lap. You want me to show you that I want you. You want me to be responsible and proactive. Okay, I'm coming.
All right, so let's take some comments here. It's a great interview, Sean is saying. I thought so as well. I think Arlene was very clear in her responses, and she did say, if you have questions or follow-up questions, maybe your question didn't get asked, be sure to attend the AGM and ask them there. I see Orville saying, Arlene, I see you saying all this with your chest out, so let's see going forward. Indeed, we shall. Mr. Host, do you invest in options? Not at this time. I am interested in learning, actually. So if you know a good options YouTube channel or course that I can take, just let me know. Let's see. Sean is saying, let's see how 2024 treats iCreate, but it's way too risky at the moment to invest. So I think that it's important to see how things progress over time. So I do agree with you, Sean, that it's important to watch things. In terms of the risk, I personally would want to hear more and see things kind of build on the foundation to see where they are. But in terms of whether or not to invest, I leave that to each of you to decide. And you're also saying Godspeed, Arlene. You're a brave lady. I mean, I think as she said, she's gonna be making it an intention to speak more, comment more. So let's look forward to that. Alfonso is saying, we met at a KFC in Runaway Bay a few months back. What do you think about the new company from TNT? Which new company, Alfonso? I do remember meeting you. Which company are you referring to? Are you talking about AS Bryden? It must be. So yeah, I think it's AS Bryden. I haven't really dug deep into the company as yet. I am curious and interested to see how things go for them. So yeah, maybe we'll cover it soon. Who am I says Golden Crush should go public. Shellyan is asking if I'm going to be streaming their AGM. No plans are in place for that. If they ask and are interested, we can definitely work something out. And then who am I saying Grace Kennedy should buy Golden Crust and take it public? Well, Grace has been buying some companies, so it's interesting to see what they do with them. And so I think Grace is one of those companies that can really have a lot of opportunities in terms of what they can do with the companies that they have in their portfolio. So yeah, let's see what they do. So so that's it pretty much for tonight's show. Make sure that you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with a friend. Remember to also subscribe to Khalila's newsletter at khalilareynolds.com/newsletter. Remember to turn on post notifications so that you can be the first to see when Khalila's features come out. It's very important because YouTube doesn't always send you that notifications, right? So you want to be sure to turn that on. We do want to help people to learn more about money so we can all get this money together. You want to be sure to follow Khalila on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok at Khalila Ray, and follow KRM Business News on Instagram. Remember, those are her only accounts. She does not have any backup. Do not follow any DMs asking you to pay any money or anything like that. So be sure to look for the blue check mark that I believe she has on Instagram now. So that's the only account that you should respond to. If you do want to connect with the analysts who were here this week, check the description box below for their contact information. And also remember to visit Khalila's website at khalilareynolds.com for financial information that you can use however you like it, whether watch, reading, or listening. Also, I do encourage you, if you haven't done so already, to follow me personally on social media at Learn, Grow, Invest. And you certainly want to tell a friend about taking stock. Investing is the new sexy. So let's make it cool to talk about money. I'm Jermaine McDonald, and thank you so much for watching.
Let's get this money.